back to another art class with Mr. Thompson. So today we have another video to start off our art class, and I want you to be thinking about what are we going to be diving into and exploring today in today's art video. Remember, we started a new unit yesterday, which had to do with the graphic novel. So what do you think we're going to be studying today? We're going to jump right into the video and we will get started. So.
Oh man, this is it!
By my mother's mandible, I say nay!
It's the Crimson Gin! I stole it, CC! You saved me!
Actually, Timmy, you saved me from myself. Wow, that was schmaltzy. Who'd you say writes my comic book?
Some 40-year-old dude who lives with his mom.
Any money in it?
Lives with his mom.
Right. Let's go kick some bad guy booty.
Up, and away!
Notice that they have the stippling in the background throughout this
It's the Crimson Cry, baby!
this design to create that shadowing.
So, last issue.
I got it!
Nice use of chin, Clef.
Hey!
See, they have the stippling all throughout the background to create that shadowing.
Now I'm using it.
Look out, dude!
You might have a kneecap of bronze kneecap, but you've always had a jaw made of glass.
It's been great working with you, Mr. Chin.
The pleasure's all mine, Timmy. I'm glad we're pals, whether I'm real or not. You're part of my continuity now. After all, every chin needs a clef.
Cool! What's next?
Nothing. It's the end of the book. See, that's the letters to the editor page, where geeky comic fans write about how cool I am. Hey, look! It's a letter from you.
I gotta go.
You spelled chin wrong.
Cutie human.
All right, so that was one of my favorite cartoons that I used to watch when I was a kid. But if you haven't guessed it, we're going to be diving into how to read comic books, okay? So without further ado, we're going to jump right in. Reading comics / graphic novels. And just a little short about Mr. Thompson. I did not grow up reading a lot of comic books and graphic novels. It wasn't until I went to college that I started to read graphic novels, and I absolutely fell in love with some of the stories that I read. And we're going to be reading one of my favorite graphic novels together as a class as well. So, reading graphic novels, reading comics. First thing we need to know about graphic novels and comics are panels, right? So panels in a graphic novel are the boxes or shapes that contain the pictures and images in a comic book or graphic novel. Panels actually are really important in that they can vary in size, shape, and placement. So panels can be different sizes, they can be different shapes, and they can be in different places on the page. And all of those have different meanings, and we'll look at an example in the next slide. Traditionally, they're closed boxes, but you will find some panels that are open to show different messages. Okay, so for example, in this page of the graphic novel, you can see that the panels are not all perfect squares. We have a panel here that's overlapping. We have this panel overlapping. All of these panels are placed specifically to show that everything is not happening in a neat, nice, simultaneous way. So that overlapping and the disorganization or seeming disorganization of the panels are actually showing you that there's more going on than, okay, it being in a perfect order, as in first this thing's happen, then this thing happens, then this thing happens. So it's not in order. It's actually showing you that what's happening in this story is really complicated. Okay. Next, we have the gutter, or what's called the gutter space. The gutter space is the space in between the panels. and traditionally is used to transition from one panel to another. If you look at a comic book, this is a space where you that is actually between the panel, and it's where you use your imagination to imagine what's happening from panel to panel. Okay, the gutter space, it can be our artists play an experiment with the gutter space, so it can be different colors, it can be black, it can have images or little designs or details or words in the gutter space to let you know that something else has happened or something else is happening in between those panels. So when you read a regular novel, if you've ever read a novel and you came to the end of the page and there were like three dots or some stars in the middle of the page, those stars and those dots signify a break in time. The artist in a comic book or a graphic novel can use that gutter space and put different details and different colors and things in the gutter space to also signify breaks in time or important events that happen between each panel. Okay, so here's an example. We have this panel up at the top. This panel, notice this panel is bigger than a lot of the rest. However, as we look at this panel, we have the teacher at the front talking to the class, right? And he's saying how he makes class really awesome. And we have students in the middle paying attention, engaged in the class. We see drawings and things in on this student's desk or on the board. But meanwhile, notice how all this space is white and all of these panels are part of a larger panel, which is this panel that's focused on the main character. So again, you have these different spaces. This gutter space is actually part of this panel. So this shows that while all of these things are happening, the character is the main focus, and all of these things are happening outside of that character. So the character is outside of this panel, meaning that she's not engaged in the class, right? So this gutter space is being used to show how she's outside of the focus or what should be the focus in this page, okay? Next, we have speech bubbles. The speech bubble, just as it sounds, is a bubble where the artist or the author uses the bubble to show you what the character is saying. So you might have seen this if you text on an iPhone and that blue bubble, it has that little fin at the bottom. That's a speech bubble. Okay, so you've seen speech bubbles before in different mediums, but there are other kinds of bubbles. So you have speech bubbles, you have thought bubbles, and you have sound bubbles. Sound bubbles are usually like very spiky and pointy. They're used to show what we call automatopoeia. Automatopoeia is basically a fancy way to say a word that represents sound. So as we saw in the introductory video where you had the Crimson Chin fighting the Bronze Kneecap, and when he would hit him, the word would pop up like pow, kazam, blah blah blah. So those are examples of sound bubbles that show and emphasize onomatopoeia. Okay, for example, this is a traditional speech bubble. So we see Timmy Turner or the boy Chin Wonder and the Crimson Chin. They're talking, they're having a dialogue. And in this speech bubble, Timmy Turner is saying, some 40-year-old dude lives with his mom, right? So this is literally what Timmy Turner is saying to the Crimson Chin. Also, I just wanted to point out one more time, notice how the artist is using stippling in the back to create shadows for on the moon as well as on the building, right? We talked about stippling yesterday, so I wanted to revisit that. Next, we have thought bubbles. Thought bubbles are very similar to speech bubbles, but a thought bubble is what's happening internally with a character. It's what the character is thinking, and it's to show mood, motivation. It can also be used to show foreshadowing. So it can set you up for what to expect to happen later on in the story. So pay attention when when we're reading the next graphic novel. We're going to be paying attention to the actual layout and design of the graphic novel as well. So thought bubbles, just like they sound, they are bubbles that tell you what the character is thinking and feeling. Okay, so if we look at this classic X-Men comic, we have both speech bubbles. Notice that this is what the character is saying with the speech bubble. So this is actually what they would be saying out loud. And here we have the thought bubble. So this is what the character is thinking, and this is what Nightcrawler is thinking. So we have Cyclops, Nightcrawler, etc., etc. But for example, I don't think the little Fraulein likes me. Notice how his posture, he's kind of off to himself, and he's thinking that. So this thought bubble is used to show mood, emotion, etc. of this character. So thought bubbles are usually used in that way, whereas speech bubbles are what the character is saying and is what's driving the story forward. Okay. I want to give a huge shout out to some student work. As I said before, I'm going to be shouting you guys out as I get more and more student work, and I saw some brilliant work today coming from, and I want to specifically shout out Tiana because I've seen her draw in the past, and she has such a huge talent. And she did a phenomenal job with her blending practice. She did a great job with her hatching and her cross hatching. I also want to shout out Asia Almond. I want to shout out Akila Stapleton. I want to shout out Kenneth Bates for their submissions and their artwork. It was also really, really good. So check back. We're going to go to the Google Classroom, and there I will tell you what your assignment is. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you guys and seeing your awesome work. All right. Have a great day. Bye.